so we may not go live. We'll see. I have a little bit of technology challenges. Okay, admit all. All right, so we are live. All right, now let's see how I get the Zoom part to not let me hear myself. All right, I'm gonna turn volume down. All righty, guys. I am getting over a bit of a cold, so I've got my water, I've got some coffee. So if I cough in y'all's face, I am sorry. Let's go ahead, give everybody a couple of minutes to get in. How's everybody feeling today? Are we feeling good, positive, scared? How are we feeling?
I'm up for the challenge.
Up for the challenge. I hear you. I am there.
I'm ready. Let's go.
There's been so much misinformation being put out there that it kills me. We'll go over some of what that is today too. But for those that don't know, the reason I'm doing this training, I'm in North Carolina. So most of the agents here are going to be from North Carolina. There may be some that are South Carolina or other states that haven't had buyer agency be required prior to the offer. Just tuning in, kind of seeing what's North Carolina been doing and why are they not as afraid as all of us are? So if you're not from North Carolina, number one, this is North Carolina specific to our contracts, forms, license law, all the things. I don't know how your state's going to do it, what rules they're going to have or anything like that. So don't take what I say and try to implement it if it's going to break your license law. Go to your broker in charge. If you are a broker in charge, you need to go to your real estate commission and ask the questions to make sure what can you do in your state. But hopefully this will give you some ideas. With that being said, number one, first and foremost, this training is not about price fixing. There is no standard commission. We all know this. Commissions are negotiable. So when I am talking about commissions in this training, I will say X%. I'm not going to say 2.5, 3, $1,500, 1, none of that, because there is no standard commission. This is simply a training on how to handle buyer consults, handle these agency agreements, do some Q&A, best practices, things of that nature. The second thing, when we get to Q&A, all I ask is that everybody be positive. I do not want this to turn into a vent session or a crystal ball gazing where we're like, well, what we could today, let's train on what we have in front of us today and how training on that and implementing it now will help us if this change goes into effect in the future. That's a couple of housekeeping. So with that being said, this is not law yet. This has not been settled. A judge still has to approve it. So the sky is falling, woe is me, freaking out right now. And all these questions like, well, what happens with VA buyers and all that? We don't know yet because number one, a judge hasn't approved this. And number two, we don't know all the exact specifics. That's first and foremost. What I do want to say is, let's say the judge does approve this. It's going to have a snowball effect, right? MLSs, real estate commissions, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, all of these people are going to have to change some guidelines because they're not going to let buyers not be able to buy. I spoke with one of the lenders that's going to be on this call with us, and that was her point exactly. She was like, do you think that if veterans can't have a buyer's agent unless they pay for them, which VA says they can't, that they're not going to start changing those guidelines? You're not going to have some veterans up in arms? Absolutely. So a lot of change between now and July is going to happen if this is approved. That's one. The other thing I keep hearing is NAR lost. NAR did not lose. Losing implies you actually went to trial and lost that trial. NAR settled. And then I keep hearing they settled with the Department of Justice. No, they didn't. They settled with the attorneys that were representing the plaintiffs. Okay, so that settlement, what I particularly like about it, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, and we have one on here, so maybe he'll chime in as we get to the Q&A part, but a settlement is not case law. It doesn't set a precedent. So by settling, instead of losing in court, which in court, I don't think we would have lost. I truly don't, if we would have had competent attorneys on NAR's part, it's not case law at that point. So that's that. The other thing I want to talk about is the agents out there that are like, oh my God, how are we ever going to work this and that? I want to tell you something. NAR is an association. You choose to be a member of that. MLSs, some like ours, Canopy, require us to be a member in order to be part of their MLS. So what's that going to look like? I said either Friday or Saturday when I went live, I said, you need to get hyper local. Treat this like politics, right? I know we don't like talking about politics, but you need to get hyper local, because truth be told, your MLSs requiring you to be part of NAR to have access to MLS, they're the ones that kind of sold us down the road, in my opinion. What that means is if our MLS didn't require that NAR membership and our MLS didn't have contracts with NAR, then guess what? This settlement doesn't affect us at all. At all. I'm going to mute everybody. Hold on one second. So those are just some of the misinformations I've seen going around, and wrapping your brain around what this actually is will help. Fear and gloom. We know the media loves to fearmonger. I don't care what side of the aisle you are on politics. They feed on fear. And that's why you're seeing these headlines. 6% commission going away. We've seen them, right? This is where educating your clients is really going to come into play, and pointing that out, getting ahead of it, right? I had a seller call me and say, oh, 6% commission is going away, Alexis. Let's go ahead and take that buyer agent commission out. And I said, you know, the agreement you signed doesn't expire until June 19th, 2024. These changes have not gone into effect. These changes haven't been approved. Let's talk about what that looks like for you. You've already been on the market for 34 days with 5 showings, which number one tells us you're overpriced and buyers don't see the value in your home. Now let's assume that the house that just went live 1 week ago in your neighborhood that is very similar to yours still offers 2.5%. You have now just cut your buyer pool, because what buyer in their right mind is going to buy your house when they have to compensate a buyer's agent, as opposed to the one that's already going to do it for them? So while I understand you want to do that, and we can do that because commissions are negotiable, it's not in your best interest. You think it over. Let me know what you want to do. They called me back 2 hours later and they said, let's keep the buyer agent commission. Should we add a bonus? So having conversations is important. With that being said, I created a PowerPoint. I'm terrible with PowerPoints. I'm going to screen share, and we're going to dive right into exactly what this is supposed to be. I'm hoping everybody can see my screen. I think you can. So we're going to start an actual presentation. All right, so North Carolina Buyer Agency Training presented by Alexis Hughes. Who am I and what we're going to be talking about? Introduction, buyer consultations, buyer agency agreements, listing appointments, best practices, and then we're going to do Q&A, possibly some role playing. I am very much an example type of person. If you tell me something, I won't get it, but if you go through it with me, I will. So I'm here to do that as well. So I'm Alexis Hughes. You'll see that quote up there. That's what's on my cup that my awesome buyer client gave me. Realtor, because badass miracle worker isn't a job title. And today, guys, I want you to remember that the buyers you have worked with in the past value you. They see your value. And you are a miracle worker a lot of times. Think about some of the hardest buyer transactions you've ever been a part of. Now think about a buyer doing that unrepresented while working their full-time job, taking care of their kids, possibly working a part-time job to make ends meet, and having to research vendors and do all the things, right? You guys are miracle workers, and that's where your headspace needs to be. If you focus on the positive instead of the negative, you're going to make positive plans. So in May of this year, I will have been licensed full-time for 7 years. In that short period of time, I've been part of one of 2 historical real estate markets that have occurred in the last 20 to 30 years. The first one being the 2008-2009 market crash. Wasn't a part of that one. I had just graduated high school 2 years after that. I have been a part of over 450 transactions in that time frame, 2/3 of those being buyers. Consistently in the Charlotte market, we have about 16,000 agents. Consistently, I rank about top 3% of those agents as a single agent, based on my individual production. I'm a certified mentor with my firm, and I'm a team leader. So I'm not saying I am the most experienced in the world, but I will say that I've seen a lot, and I've always made my business about the contracts and what we're supposed to be able to do, what we can't do, how I can make those contracts work for my clients. And so I think that gives me a unique perspective, because I've never been the agent that's just like, well, this is how it's done. Sorry. No, you guys are supposed to be solution givers. And part of being part of the solution is knowing your contract. So I'm really big on quotes, as you can see. Incredible change happens in your life when you decide to take control over what you do have power over, instead of craving control over what you don't. Guys, we do not have control over every single aspect of a real estate transaction. If you think back to the COVID madness, when certain builders were offering $1,500 to a buyer's agent, we didn't have control over what they offered us. We did have control over what we accepted. So what do we have control over? Quite a bit. We have control over our services. What are we going to provide our clients? We have control over the fee that we personally charge. If you haven't already, you guys are business owners. Do you think that Midas oil change, I don't even know, they might be a tire company. Let's talk about a place that you, Jiffy Lube. Go to Jiffy Lube to get an oil change. Do you think that they open their business and they say, we're going to provide oil changes, and in those oil changes, we're going to change your air filters, and you know what? We don't know what we're going to charge for that. We'll just decide per customer. No, they have a set rate that they charge for their services, and they know exactly what is included in that rate. So getting very, very clear on what your fee is, that's what you have control over. Educating your clients, that means buyers and sellers, you have control over that. They are trusting you. They are hiring you. You have control over it. And flip side of that, that means you have to educate yourself, because you don't want to look stupid when they pull out a news article and you have no idea what it is. We have control over our knowledge of our contracts and our laws, and we have control over our mindset. That is a lot of shit we have control over. So why are we panicking? I am not here to say that there's not a reason to train, to get prepared, to think about the what ifs and come up with solutions for those. I am saying the sky is not falling, especially in North Carolina. We've always done it this way. Only change that is happening in North Carolina is MLS is now not going to have commissions advertised. Well, guys, if we were doing what we were supposed to do anyway, we were not looking at that to decide whether we were going to show that house. We'll get into that here shortly. So buyer consultations is what we're going to jump into first, okay? If you have not ever done a buyer consultation, please, please, please start taking notes, okay? This will be recorded, but take notes. A buyer consultation is a must. I am guilty of not always doing a buyer consultation. I am guilty of that. Guess what? Moving forward, that is going to be a standard practice of my business for any buyer I work with. You and only you control what you will accept. Do you know your value proposition? You're going to need that for your buyer consult. What are you bringing to the table? Get very honest with yourself. Are you a door opener, or do you provide more than that? If I ask you right now to unmute your mic and list out the top 5 reasons a buyer should work with you, what would that look like? If the first thing that comes to mind is I get you access to homes, congratulations, you're a door opener. If the first thing that comes to my mind is Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I've represented 450 transactions in my career, 2/3 of those being buyers. And I can tell you right now that no buyer I've ever worked with has had to pay my commission. I've always negotiated with the sellers to do it. That's number 1. Because that's what they're going to want to know. Why should we work with you? Why are you worth X% when Bobby Joe Smith is charging less than that? Well, let me tell you why. Just like with listing appointments, guys. Why are your buyers going to want you as their agent? Start thinking of that. Are buyers going to want you as their agent because you're readily available? I hear so many people on all these national real estate boards and these masterminds, and hell, some from big brokerages. I hear them right now shitting on new agents and how they're not going to be in this market anymore. And I'm here to tell seasoned agents and agents that have an established book of business, do not sleep on those new agents. Those agents have time you don't have. They have time to research the properties. They have time to send out 20 confirmation of compensations before showing the property. They have time to answer their clients' phone calls. So get very, very clear on why buyers are going to want to work with you. And that's more than I have access to homes. And that's more than I've helped 450 buyers, right? It's great that you help 450 buyers, Alexis. That's very great. But we'll say Susie Smith has only helped 15, but her team leader has helped 450 buyers, and she's going to be available to me more. Resource guides are great, but you need to go further than that, right? A resource guide is great to educate them on the process of buying a home in general, but we've got to go a little bit further. What's that look like? You need to make sure your buyers are informed. So in North Carolina, if you do not have a buyer's agency agreement signed and you are taking clients out to houses, you are now a subagent of the seller. And what's that mean, right? Are you a buyer's agent or a subagent? You're not a buyer's agent for that client until they sign that agreement with you. And I know, myself included, have been guilty of not getting that agreement signed until we're about to write an offer. And that's only because the law says I have to have it reduced to writing before I put in an offer for a client. So what do you educate your clients on when you're in a buyer agency consultation? Well, this first and foremost, hey, Mr. Buyer, let me tell you what happens if you don't sign my buyer agency agreement, okay? I'm a sub-agent of the seller at that point. I still owe you honesty. My loyalty is to the seller and their needs. Anything that you tell me, I have to relay all that information back to the seller. I do have to disclose just material facts about the property, current price, how many days on the market, but I can't tell you if it's priced appropriately or not. I'm a sub-agent of the seller. I owe them my loyalty, not you. Can't give you a CMA unless it supports the seller's listing price, so no price counseling. Also, suggestions made regarding financing or any other terms have to be in the benefit of the seller, because I owe them my loyalty. I have to negotiate on behalf of the seller too. I bet you didn't know that. And I have to strengthen their negotiating position, which means I can't tell you anything about them that I may know. And I have to attempt to solve problems and close the transaction to satisfy the seller's needs, wants, motivations. But Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, let me tell you what happens if you sign this buyer agency agreement. You're still going to get honesty, but my loyalty now goes to you. I'm going to keep any information that you give me confidential. You can talk freely. You can ask questions. That seller and that seller's agent, their listing agent's never going to know what you tell me. I'm going to give you full disclosure of all facts, right? Full price history. You're going to know how much they bought it for, what they pay in taxes. You're going to know the total days on the market, because right now you don't know. They pulled that sucker off the market for 90 days to the price, or the days on the market reset. I'm going to give you advice and opinions along with facts. I'm going to educate you. You're going to get my knowledge and expertise. I do this every single day. You do this maybe 1 to 4 times in your lifetime. I'm going to give you an opinion of the value of the home. We all know that the list price is not actually what the home may be worth. A seller can list it for whatever they want to, but is it really worth that? So you'll get my price counseling. You're going to get suggestions made in your best interests, like, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, guess what? I'm noticing a big ass trench on the left of this home that sits on an incline. During due diligence, we may want to have that looked at by a professional landscaping company to see if there's drainage issues. We don't want you to have a house flood after you buy it. North Carolina is a buyer beware state. Just remember that. You may not know to look for that. I know to look for that. Prepare, offer, and negotiate on your behalf. Well, I know that doesn't seem like much, but our offer to purchase is pretty long. And there's going to be some things in that if you don't know to look out for, you're not going to know to check. So that's where I come in, because I do this every day. You do this 1 to 4 times in your lifetime. I'm going to attempt to strengthen your negotiating position. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you're not going to know that typically in this neighborhood, houses only close at 95% of list price. And typically on average, the sellers are giving about $5,000 to $6,000 in concessions. I know that. And since you hire me, I can tell you that now. Attempt to solve problems and close the transaction to satisfy the buyer. Your best interest, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. So you need to make sure that they understand what they're losing when they want to work with the listing agent in a dual agency situation. When they want to go in unrepresented, they need to understand what they're losing. Educate them. If you don't know all the things that you're required to do as a sub agent, get to know them and start educating your clients. Buyer's consultation should include the following: going over with a working with real estate agent. We're supposed to do that at first substantial contact. So I get a call, ring, 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 ring. Hey, Alexis, I want to see 123 Apple Lane at 2 p.m. Great, Bob. I just need to go over a couple of things with you before showing you that property. Do you have 10, 15 minutes to jump on either a phone call or a Zoom call? Well, Alexis, I'm really busy. I just want to see the house. Not a problem, Bob. I understand. Let me tell you what's going to happen. If I show you this house, I'm going to have to tell the seller all the information. There's a lot, but by law, I have to go over working with real estate agents. Give me 5 minutes. I'm going to go over it with you now. And then you go over what it is. Know you're working with real estate agents like the back of your hand. If you can't explain it to me in 30 to 60 seconds, you don't know that disclosure. Going over all the things you provide in your services, right? So we just talked about a shit ton of things that buyer's agents give their clients when they decide to hire them. But what else do you do? Go over all those things, not in detail. Going over your UVP, that's your unique value proposition. You've been doing this as a listing agent anyway. Now determine what your UVP is for your buyers. Going over the buyer agency agreement in full and explaining it to them. This is a big one. If you're on a phone call, you're not going to be able to go over it in full with them, but you need to go over the key parts of it. You know, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I need to let you know that even though the seller is offering a co-op in our buyer agency agreement, my fee for services is X%. If the seller is offering less than that, I make every effort to get that from them. But the buyer agency agreement does state that if the seller isn't agreeing to pay my full fee, you come to the table with the difference. That's number one. Number two, what it also states is you agree not to cheat on me. So when you sign this, I am your exclusive buyer's agent. You're working with me and only me on every single house that you're looking at for a negotiated period of time. My standard period of time is 6 months. That's about the average time it takes to start the process, find a house, go through due diligence, and get it to the closing table. Those are my 3 non-negotiables. Is that okay with you? If not, you need to find a different agent. Most of them are fine. Or you're going to get, well, I don't even know you. I've never met you. Okay, not a problem. I completely understand that. Unfortunately, I don't get paid to show houses. I get paid to work with clients. So while I'm happy to show you this house at 2 p.m., I will require this agency agreement be signed for just this house. It'll specifically state just this house, but I do require that to be signed. That's where you stop. In previous times, we would just go through all kinds of things in that buyer consultation. What do you want in a house? Have you got pre-approved? And so on and so forth. You're going to stop that now. That is your knowledge and expertise that you're giving out for free at a buyer consultation. The 4 items on the left are your bare minimum for it. Once you go over all of this, that's when you ask them to hire you. Do not start going over lending, vendors, home must-haves, etc. until your buyer's agency agreement is signed. You're giving away your professional value without a signed agreement for free at that point. You are then essentially making yourself a door opener. You are going to have people that don't want to sign it. Okay, they don't want to sign it. Imagine what nightmares they're going to be when they have to sign other documents that they don't understand or don't want to sign. They already don't trust you. So that is how it works. So Alexis, how do I frame this, right? I have clients that want to work with me. I don't know how to frame this. It's quite simple. I got a referral yesterday. Mr. White sent Mr. White a text message. Hey, Mr. White, my name is Alexis Hughes with eXp Realty. Not gonna name names. Susie Q from ABC Realty gave me your contact information because you're relocating to Charlotte. I would love to jump on a call and chat with you and go over some information with you. Is tomorrow at 3 p.m. good, or would this weekend be better? You know what they responded? Hey, Alexis, 6 p.m. works great tonight. Do you have that available? Do you work nights? Well, as a matter of fact, Mr. White, I do work evenings, and 6 p.m. tomorrow works great. I will give you a call then and we can go over some stuff. Boom, buyer consult set. It's not always going to be that easy if you're answering Zillow leads. I know that Zillow has some rules in place that you're not supposed to do that. I am going to assume that they're going to change that if this NAR stuff goes into effect. You're going to just have to look for guidance from Zillow on that one. Consider infographics. So here you can see steps to success when buying a home. Okay, maybe, oh, I need to go back. Maybe you do have that Zillow call coming in. Okay, you send this to them. I understand you don't want to sign anything right now. Totally get it. Here is what I provide. Here are the steps to buying a home. Buyer consultation, decide who to hire. Then once you've hired the agent, you get all this great stuff that I'm going to give you because I've spent my life making this a career and I know it all. So an infographic is a great way to get information out there and start educating buyers, because right now they don't know. How many times have you guys taken a call and they think they're talking to the listing agent? How many times have you taken a call and they have an agent, they just didn't know what they signed? Because let's be honest, not all agents are going over buyer agency agreements like they should when they're having their clients sign it. So infographics and educating. We see a ton of TikToks with dances. We see a ton of reels with kind of funny real estate memes. We see less of educating our North Carolina clients. So do a better job of educating. You guys get this? Educate, educate, educate. All right, buyer agency agreements. I want to go over those just briefly now. So I am going to stop this presentation and get to it if I can figure out how to do that. I'm going to end the show. And I just want to point out some things that have always been in there. I want to make sure that you understand them too. So right here we have a buyer agency agreement with Jane Doe, Apple Lane Realty, right? So let's say you're getting that buyer agency agreement signed for just one house, guys, just one. You want to interview, you want to be interviewed, they want to interview you, they want to see how you work. Okay, great. Right here on the other, just put this agreement and its terms apply to 123 Apple Lane only. What we're not going to do is have this expire that same day, unless you understand what that means. So right here, we're going to go out today. It expires at 11:59 p.m. Okay. I'm going to charge a non-refundable retainer of $150 for that showing, that one showing, that will be credited towards any compensation due to the firm under this agreement. I'm going to tell that buyer my fee's 3.5%. I'm going to put 3.5% in everything. In everything. We're going to have a conversation. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if the seller ends up offering less than 3.5%, I'm not going to hold your feet to the fire to come up with the remainder, as long as the commission is, we'll just say, within 1% of that. That's my fee for service. Don't y'all go out here saying Alexis said charge 3.5%. No, that's my fee. This is my business. Y'all do what you want to do. But what you guys do have to remember is if this does take effect, all the things we're hearing, if it does take effect, you can be paid less than what's in your buyer agency agreement, but you cannot be paid more. So an example of that is if your buyer agency agreement says 20%, I'm going to throw out something insane. If your buyer agency agreement says 20% and the seller agrees to pay 25%, that 5% is not yours. You're not getting paid that. You can never be paid more. So it's best to set high, have conversations with your clients, come down within reason if you need to. Look here. right here. This is the part nobody has been explaining in good order. The firm shall seek the fee from the cooperating listing firm through the listing firm's offer of compensation in MLS or otherwise, or from the seller if there's no listing. So number one, your fiduciary duty to your buyer clients is Mr. and Mrs. Buyer Client. It's my job to negotiate that this fee is paid for you by the seller or the listing. That's my job. Number two, if the buyer purchased a property where compensation offered by the listing firm and or seller is less than the fee, or where no compensation is offered by either the listing firm or the seller, buyer and firm agree that the buyer will pay the difference between the fee and the compensation offered unless prohibited by law. Case in point, VA loans, right? We will talk about VA loans when we get to Q&A. If additional compensation, incentive, bonus, rebate, and or other valuable consideration is offered through MLS or otherwise, buyer will permit the firm to receive it in addition to the fee. In North Carolina, it's already saying if additional is offered. So North Carolina might be fine, whereas some states that don't have this may not. The compensation shall be deemed earned when X happens. You know, you guys close or the buyer breaches contract. This is where you need to be filling this in, because even though this agreement expires March 20th at 11:59 p.m., if within 180 days after expiration of this agreement, buyers enter into a contract to acquire property introduced to the buyer during the term of this agreement by firm or any third party, unless buyers entered into a valid buyer agency agreement with another firm, we're still owed compensation. So there's your protection there. So you come down here, educate them on the duties. That goes back to that sub-agent versus buyer agent. And really get to know this form. Additional provisions, right? If fee offered by listing firm is larger than the fee listed here, to include bonuses, the buyer agrees to increase the fee listed here to match what is being offered from the listing firm. Damn. How easy is that? Now, could it come out in the coming months that that's no longer allowed? Absolutely come out. But we're talking about today, right now. How can we do it right now? So that's an example. As you go through, if you guys don't know this, I really want you to start taking some buyer agency training, because you need to know these contracts. It's very important. So next part, your job as a listing agent, right? Listing appointments are going to be your best friend, especially because sellers are the ones looking and saying, oh, 6%'s gone out the window. CNN said so. We no longer have to pay 6%. We don't have to pay a buyer's agent. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you never have had to pay a buyer's agent. And that's where we go back to educate. At listing appointments, this is where you can shine as the expert, ensuring your sellers know they have the option to offer to compensate the buyer's agent. Okay, we need to stop using words. You must, it's required. It has to be this, the standard amount is this. That is all not true and can be deemed illegal, and why we're in this situation to begin with. You need to determine your fee for listing services. Okay, explain your fee for their listing. So how would that look? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, in order to list your home, I charge 20% of the purchase price. Of that 20%, I compensate a buyer's agent 10, right? Please understand that you do not have to agree to compensate that buyer's agent 10%. That is my full service listing package. Here's my a la carte here. For my a la carte, I charge 10% for everything that you would get minus the buyer agent commission. My tier 2 package, you'll get professional photography and I'll do some open houses. Figure out what your listing packages look like and what they are. Explain your fee for listing their home separate from the buyer agent compensation. This will bite you on the butt. I've seen agents in Georgia, and I don't even work in Georgia. I'm not licensed in Georgia, but I know enough about their laws. I've seen a listing agent say, nope, I showed the house, and so now you're only getting 1%. Show me in your fucking listing agreement where it says that if you show the house, I only get 1%, because I'm pretty sure your sellers didn't agree to that. explain it separately. Educate the sellers on the pros and cons of offering buyer's agent compensation. It's one thing to say you're less competitive, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Show them data. If you show them data, you're not just telling them. They just don't have to trust your word. They're seeing it there in black and white. What is that data? When you're pulling comps, show them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we have 123 Apple Lane, 124 Apple Lane, and 125 Apple Lane. All of them offered X percentage of buyer agent commission, and they all went multiple offers, closed over list price, and were under contract within a week. But then you have 125 Apple Lane that offered absolutely nothing, sat on the market for 40 days and closed 93% of list price. You can find that information in your MLS right now. Is that going to change in the future? Absolutely. Absolutely, it's going to change in the future. Do we know how to handle that yet? Absolutely not. We're not here today to talk about crystal ball gazing and what we're going to do in the future with that information. But you can have the conversation if this change goes into effect, instead of having the data to show them what competing properties have offered traditionally. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, understand we don't know what any other listing is offering a buyer's agent, or if they're even offering a buyer's agent a commission. Right now, we need to determine what you feel comfortable with. In the net proceeds sheet I brought with me to this listing appointment, I've accounted for a buyer agent commission already of X%. Is that comfortable with you to ensure that we're as competitive as we can be in this market? Yes, Alexis, it is. I love the net proceeds. It doesn't matter. But what happens if, we get a lower offer? Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, depending on who showed the home, we still might have to honor that even if it's lower. But remember, you don't have to accept an offer you don't want to accept. There's some scripts and some training on that, but listing agents are the ones that are going to have to really shine and educate sellers, because they don't know. You're always going to have a cheap seller. I'm not going to tell you not to take a listing if they don't offer a buyer agent compensation. I'm not going to tell you to do any of that. I've taken overpriced listings before. I've taken discount listings before that I've discounted for my normal fee because of a certain situation. What I will say though, be very careful, because if this goes into effect, be very careful. You need to have a set standard of practices, because what we don't want to happen is I show a house to Bob Smith on Saturday and I don't make him sign a buyer agency agreement. I charge a fee to him that is not my normal standard practice. And then on Monday, I should Mary the house, but I make her sign a buyer agency agreement. I make her pay a higher fee, so on and so forth. Be very careful, because you could get into accusations of discrimination in those situations. So I advocate for a set practice. Like, what is your set practice? What does it look like? What are the parameters in which you're going to work? Have it in writing too, so you can never be accused of it. You should have that already, but if you don't, get with it. Get the word out, right? So, how do I know what I'm going to be working for? We can't see it in MLS, guys. MLS is not the only thing out there. If your seller is offering compensation to a buyer's agent, this is good news. This is good news, and you don't need MLS to advertise this efficiently and effectively. MLS makes it more efficient, yes, but it's not the only place. You can have it on your websites. We should all have websites, and if you don't have a website, you have a Facebook business page, okay? What I will say are there are agents suggesting, oh, just put it in an attachment or put it in agent remarks. Well, if we're reading the settlement the way it reads, it can be nowhere in MLS at all. So what's that look like? Well, in Canopy, in our MLS, we have showing time. So maybe once an appointment is confirmed in showing time, just like the residential property disclosures in the MA, now they automatically get a signed confirmation of compensation for me and my seller. Automatically, as soon as that appointment is confirmed, it pops off to them, and they know right away whether they're getting paid or not. Confirm in the showing notes. Maybe you don't want to do an attachment because you don't know, and you want to leave it open, or your seller does, but in the showing agent notes, sellers willing to offer up to X percentage to a buyer's agent. Again, brokerage websites and in-house advertising to other agents in the firm is going to be a huge help, and social media. Social media is absolutely going to be huge for this. You can lead generate from this. I mean, it will be awesome. Imagine an open house, right? Before, we're going to set this open house and we only want buyers not represented by agents to come in. Well, now I have 25 listings. I've got to make sure that people can see it regardless. I don't have time, and buyers don't want to sign this buyer agency agreement with me just to show them a house that I've got listed. I want to make it worth my time. All right, well, guess what? We're going to have to streamline the process. Hey, Wednesday, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., we are holding an open house. Buyer agents and their clients are welcome. It's only for clients that have buyer agency agreements signed already, if you don't want to practice dual agency. Or if you are an unrepresented buyer and you attend, you will be required to sign this buyer agency agreement for this one house. So that's how you can handle some things like that. Why it's not clicking? Okay. The sellers says that they're absolutely not offering any compensation to a buyer's agent at all. That's their right, their choice. How do you solve that problem? It's one thing to say, well, they're not doing it. How do you solve that as a buyer's agent showing a house where the seller's offering nothing? Confirmation of compensation prior to showing has always been a thing in North Carolina, always. So when I see a house, my client likes it. Hey, Bob, I know you love this house. I just need to let you know that the seller's not offering to pay the fee for services you agreed to pay in the buyer agency agreement. Per that buyer agency agreement, I have to do everything possible to get the listing firm or the seller to pay that fee for you. I'm going to send to you a confirmation of compensation for you to sign, and I'm going to forward it over to the seller and the listing agent. If they do not sign it, that means you're responsible for my fee. In the event they do not sign it, do you still want to see this home? He's going to say yes or no. Great. Yes, you still want to see it if they don't sign it. All right. Just make sure you're confirming you're going to pay my fee. Yes. Or he says, no, Alexis, I don't even want to see it if they're not offering anything. Great. Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to text that listing agent. I'm going to say, hey, Susie Q at ABC Realty. I had a client that was interested in 321 Apple Lane, and we were going to see it, but because the seller is not offering any compensation to a buyer's agent, they've decided to pass. I just wanted to provide you this professional courtesy so you can share this feedback with your seller. Does it make our job harder? Does it make it more complicated? Yes, it does. But we've got to pivot. We've got to change. Remember, we can focus on things we can control, not the things we don't have control over. A lot of people have said seller concessions to cover this. There are certain situations where this might be okay, but as we've all seen, VA loans may present issues, and sometimes your buyer needs seller concessions for their closing costs, and it caps the loan amount out. That's why we're going to have Q&A with a lender. Now, time for Q&A. Reminders. Do not talk about standard commission rates or percentages in place of a number. Just state X percentage of purchase price. We do not want to be accused of price fixing. We're not going to have all the answers, guys, but we need to really get comfortable being uncomfortable. And this is brainstorming some solutions that we can implement now based on today's laws. Things can change. Things can change in the future. And as they do, we will pivot, we will train, we will learn. The housing market and how real estate agents have been compensated has always changed. This is the big one. Do not use this time as a vent session. This is not a vent session. We're here to get better and stronger, not to have therapy. And I know that sounds mean, but we've all, if you want therapy and to vent, go on Real Estate Mastermind, because there's 20 posts a day about it with hundreds of comments. But here, we're solution oriented. Here, we're about what can we do today. So with that being said, I'm going to stop this screen share, and I want to ask our attorney. His name is Zeno. He is Lancaster Law Firm. They are based out of Asheville, North Carolina, but they do closings all over North Carolina and offer mobile closings. So if you've ever been an agent like me where you're like, oh my God, I don't know what attorney to use that's not super far away from this house that we're closing on, Zeno is awesome. I've closed with him. He's great. We also, let's see, do I have Michelle on here? Michelle, are you on here?
I'm here.
Okay, we have Michelle with Movement Mortgage. Fabulous lender. I've closed clients with her before. I have clients that I've worked with repeatedly that will never use anybody but Michelle because she's that awesome. She took time to talk with some higher ups and get some really clear guidance for us from a lending standpoint because we have a lot of questions about that. And I just want to thank them both for being here. And with that being said, let's open up for Q&A. If you have a question, open your microphone and we'll go from there because there's bound to be questions. Anyone? If y'all don't have questions, that means I knocked this out the park and I better not see any of you in Real Estate Mastermind, right?
You did knock it out of the park. Now, I have a question, and I guess it's not really a question. You explained a lot about how, and I do it a lot the way you do in regards to my buyer agency. Have I been the one to be showing a buyer and all of a sudden we found a house and I stopped to go write that buyer agency and be like, well, you're just going to pay what the seller's offering. It's 2.5%, 3%. We've all been there, right? We do have to change the way we look at things and we do have to work a little bit harder. My thing is, Alexis, you'll go and we're not supposed to look at commission. I don't ever look at commission, but the reality is, say you're going to Meritage, right? And they're offering 6% because they need to get agents in. We've only put 3.5%. We're only getting 3.5%, right? Or and this is my question to you is, do we fill out that confirmation, compensation, all this stuff for 6%? And does that override your buyer agency? Or does it come into closing costs? I guess that's where I'm trying to figure out, do we get the bad, and I'm not venting, I'm asking, do we get the bad end of the stick? Because majority of the time, like Ryan Homes is $1,500, right? Yeah. So you sit here but if they're offering, that's where I'm trying to figure out, do we go like you did with 3.5% or do we put 6%? And then go back and say, okay.
Remind you of something right now, and because in my mind, I was like that too. I was like, well, if they're offering more, how come I can't be paid more?
Yeah.
But what we have to remember is all of us that have been flying around saying I can represent you for free. It doesn't cost you anything for my representation. No.
Yeah, that's got to go.
Buyers have always paid your commission.
Yeah.
Because the only time a buyer has not paid your commission is if they are purchasing a home from a seller for the exact balance of their mortgage. Otherwise, that money is coming from the buyers. They've always paid you that. So how I understand it is, in that scenario, your buyer agency says 3%, but Meritage is offering 6%. You cap out at 3%. That remaining 3% goes to the buyer some form or fashion. It cannot go to us.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I thought. I mean, I'd heard it in the NAR
reason
thing.
Why you can't revise your buyer agency agreement, and you could chime in too if you want on this. My understanding and how I'm perceiving it is the reason you can't alter your buyer agency agreement is because it's due before you ever even start working with that client. That's your contractual obligation, right? So what buyer in their right mind, if you go to them and say, hey, Jennifer, I know I said I was only going to charge you 3% for my services, but Meritage is offering me 6%. Let's go ahead and alter this buyer agency agreement so I get more money. No, that buyer's going to be like, well, you take the 3%. Why can't I have the other 3% for my closing costs or to buy down the price of my home? At that point, you're putting your interests ahead of your client. You're violating your buyer agency.
Right.
That's right. It's not meant to be a windfall ever. So if you tell someone this is what I charge, I don't get to do it either. Attorneys, why not, right? If that seller paid closing costs are $20,000 and I'm only charging $1,000 to do the closing, why can't I have a little bit more? The sellers are covering it. That's how I see it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not to be greedy, right? I mean, the 3.5% that you put in there, and that's not being greedy either, but it does cover you in regards to if somebody happens to be offering the 3% and you only put 2.5%, right? So I like that option. You
I
know,
also want to remind you guys, if you guys have been getting bonuses, there are two types of confirmation of compensation forms. There's one for agency and relationship. That's what you're sending out to make sure the listing firm's going to pay you what you want to be paid. There's another one, just confirmation of compensation. You should have been having your clients sign that and acknowledging that you were getting paid more. So if you haven't been doing that when you're getting bonuses on anything, make that a practice now, unless the laws change, right? They very well change in the next couple of months. But for right now, you're getting bonuses or it's more than what you should, I would be filling that out to protect myself. Any other questions? All right, so Zeno, since there's no questions right now, I'm going to ask you to share. Well, actually, do you mind? Because I know Michelle has an appointment. Do you mind if Michelle shares first? Michelle, can you go ahead and share with us some of the things you've been hearing? I know what's been floating around is adding an addendum, making the buyer agent compensation a seller cost instead of a buyer cost to get around some of these lending rules we have. Can you just share with us kind of what your higher ups have been sharing with you and how you perceive this?
I can. And also, I don't know the best way to communicate this. I'll give everybody my number. It's 803-348-5505. If you want to shoot me a text, I can send back some links for events that we have. We're having an event at our corporate office this Friday and next Friday. It's going to be a couple hours, so we'll dive a lot deeper into all the different pieces of this and kind of mastermind around it. But we're also doing some events. I think now more than ever, if you don't have a LinkedIn, you need a LinkedIn. If you don't have a huge presence on social, get it. Tomorrow, the class we're doing is we're going to help people create a Canva template. Here's how you use it, because this is now how you can advertise. I've already seen builders like, we've always paid 3%, still paying 3%. So you can't put it in the MLS, but this is your reach, right? So we can help with that. You know, I'm excited right now. I think that we've had a lot of door openers or people that just stick signs in yards. And those of us that have gotten into this industry, either side, to educate and to do things the way that we've typically done them, we're kind of dealing with some of the messes because of that, right? Due diligence lost because they had no idea what they were getting themselves into. That's a hard conversation to have with somebody. And it's like, it wasn't me, but I feel for you. I think we are at a point now where this is going to force people to sharpen their skills when it comes to educating. It's going to get us all back, you know, where we need to be. And it will clean house a little bit. So I'm excited about it. I think that the biggest thing we're dealing with right now is the news. Fear sells. That's reality. I spoke to Alexis about this earlier, and I don't know the age of everybody on the Zoom. If you don't know about this, call your mama and she can tell you. But I will never forget Y2K, right? And I use this with my buyers all the time when I'm explaining markets and what's happening with interest rates. I've termed it the Y2K effect, and any of you can use it. No royalties required. It's like, there was a time we hoarded toilet paper before COVID, and it was then like the zeros were going to take over the world, and we took our cash out of the bank, and my gosh, what was going to happen because computers. And then it hit midnight and the world didn't explode and things still worked, and we took another shot and partied on. So I think right now is educating and preparing and being prepared to have these conversations with your clients. But have your shot glass ready, because we will be very soon having another shot and partying on. As far as, do we start throwing out addendums? What do we do? You know, nothing has changed yet, especially in North and South Carolina. These are things that everybody should have been doing from the beginning. If you've been presenting it not as thorough, like, yeah, you may have more hesitations to overcome. And I didn't hear the first part of the call, so you guys may have spoken in depth to that. We're going to do some of that at the meeting, some dive a little bit deeper into best ways to educate and how you can overcome some of these hesitations. But the reality is we don't have guidance from Fannie and Freddie unless you're only dealing with cash buyers, and yay you, if that's what you've been able to create a niche for. This is what we need right now. What is the guidance from Fannie and Freddie? Are we going to, as an industry, start calling buyer's agency agreements and commissions an interested party contribution? Because if that happens, it doesn't matter whether it's baked into the original contract or if it's an addendum. This is changing the landscape of what your buyers can afford, what they qualify for, and how loans are done. Don't think that will happen, but I'm not Fannie, I'm not Freddie, and we don't know yet. My biggest thing right now, and the thing that I feel like, hey, I've heard people mention a little bit, but I can't get over it. I'm very passionate about veterans, and I don't see how some of these changes that are being implied are going to take place, how we wouldn't end up with a much larger lawsuit for discriminating against vets. Maybe Fannie comes out and says, hey, we're going to allow this fee. If I were a lawyer that's dealing with that type of, class action lawsuit, I would be advertising to every vet like, hey, Fannie is not protecting you. They're just going with the masses at this point. So I think no matter how you look at it, veterans and where that landscape is going to have a huge influence on what happens from here. Just because there's been a settlement doesn't mean that everything has to change. And in some states, it's definitely going to be more than others. But will Fannie and Freddie come out and change things? Maybe, maybe not. We will be going over interested party contributions, how that applies to all the different loan types, what you can do to work around that. As an example, I am not considered an interested party, which is so weird, right? But if I'm giving money, and by giving, yeah, you're probably going to have a higher rate unless I have an advertising agreement and it's compliant and it's never coming from my bank account or my paycheck or anything like that. But if we work out a situation where we have, let's say, a 3% down first time home buyer, that we don't want to put them in an FHA loan and have them pay a 1.75% funding fee or upfront mortgage insurance rather, because why should they pay for that when they have an 800 credit score? They just don't have a bunch of money. They don't have a 6% seller cap. They have a 3%. Well, if your commission is 3% and they have to pay it and they need closing costs, now what? I might be able to come in and say, hey, especially right now, they're going to refi in the next 12, 18 months anyhow. Let me up your rate. Let me help you with that. I hear the average is 3 to 4% of your sales price for closing costs. Well, unless you're finding $100,000 homes out there, 150, which I haven't seen in a while, then no, it's not 4%. It's probably closer to 1.5 to 2.5%. So if I can up that, I can kick back some and we can get 3% seller contribution. It really is 6 one way, half a dozen another. Like, I guess thinking of it from a seller standpoint, if they don't want to agree to pay a buyer's agent, they don't technically have to pay seller paid closing costs. Maybe if the offer is attractive enough, so it leaves them open to more opportunity. But I really think it comes back to just educating. When you're talking to your sellers, you want to pay me 3%, you don't want to pay a buyer's agent. I can't sit here 24 hours a day and open doors for you. So what are we doing? You don't want me representing buyers for you. It's a conflict of interest. So I think there's a lot going on, and really it's that shock and awe of the zeros are going to take over the world right now, that it's human nature. Something new happens and we're all kind of like, oh no, good, bad, and different. What's going to happen? How is this going to change things? And then we realize hey, this is going to be okay. Change is okay. Or maybe we don't really have big changes. But knowing what you need to know and educating, and then finding other things, I think my advice would be keep doing business as usual. Try and get things done the way you've been doing them all along. But if you can't, and you find the home that your buyers love and they don't have the money to pay you and they're not paying buyer's agency, then let's look at what are the max seller contributions. What can we do? We have it's a white labeled product. We call it Movement Boost. It's down payment assistance. It's based on an FHA loan. And it's a 5% down payment assistance. It's tribal funds. It has a second mortgage, but it's got exceptional lending terms. And it's not a small income cap. It's just very attractive. We use the extra 1.5% to buy down or to pay down debt to qualify people all the time. This could easily be something where, or to pay closing costs. This could easily be something where a program like that can be those extra funds kicked in to help. So I think there will be solutions. And just like every single, I don't know about you guys, but I can close 20 clients in a month and none of them are the same. None of their situations are the same. And it's been that way all along. So will you have people that have saved for 3 years, they don't have an extra penny to pay you, and you're up against challenges for people who aren't willing to pay? Absolutely. But I don't think that's going to be the norm. And I think there will be solutions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle? Because I know she's got a class she's got to get to before she jumps off here.
I'm going to Pilates. I don't always look like this.
Working on her fitness. All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Guys,
Alexis, if you want to shoot out the links, or if anybody wants to text me, again, it's 803-348-5505. I do a ton of events. I'm big on education. So we will have a lot, and even pulling in people from our corporate office that are high up in underwriting to continue to give guidance, but also other tools from a marketing standpoint to help you with whatever shift it may be in your business if something comes.
I dropped her cell phone number in the chat box and the RSVP link for the event Friday. If anybody would like to go ahead and RSVP or save her information. We also have Zeno's contact information there as well. So Michelle, I'll let you get to your class. You were amazing.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Good luck, everybody. Have a great day. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Thanks.
All right. Zeno, real quick. What are your thoughts? I know we're coming up on 11. This is just not a thing that we can
That's okay.
talk, but I want to get your thoughts from an attorney standpoint, and also if anybody has any legally specific questions, we can ask them here.
Yeah. So again, I'm Zeno Lancaster. I'm the owner of Lancaster Law Firm. I did post my phone number. It sounds like you'd already done that, but I just put it in the chat. So that's my cell. Text or call me anytime. So yeah, it's funny. If you go on social media, which I don't suggest you do really ever, but if you do, you're going to see the skies falling in real estate and in America. It's been, in my opinion, falling for a year now, and now it's falling more. Nothing in I don't see North Carolina as a big culprit behind all of this. It's just like Alexis has been telling you, you should have been doing all of this already. And frankly, guys, I work with realtors and see what's done and what's not done. Attorneys aren't perfect either. There are some of you that still won't do it. so you know, it sort of is what it is, but you should have been doing this already. The idea is transparency. That's what got folks in trouble on this. Transparency wasn't seen to be there for consumers, whether that's true or perceived, right? And so it's all transparency. And what's funny is, to me, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this, is how taking it off the MLS is more transparent somehow. But again, like Alexis said, all you do is communicate. There are hilarious jokes. Now, this is funny on social media, hilarious jokes about how to communicate that buyer compensation, not through MLS. I know you guys have seen the description of the property, and the capitalized words were the 3% or something. But the idea, again, is transparency. So have these conversations. things in writing will make your attorney very happy. So get an email, get the agreement signed that you need signed, and spell this out correctly. And I think that's a big part of what they want you guys to do. Look, I'm not ever going to look at a house as a consumer where my realtor's not getting paid. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I think we all know nothing. Again, there are houses before all of this happened that didn't offer much compensation to a buyer's agent. Nothing's changing. You're still going to deal with that house like you always have. Hey, do you want to pay me? Because they're not offering anything. And so not a lot's changing, guys. And if the seller wants buyer's agents to bring clients to look at that house, they're going to offer compensation to incentivize them to do that and incentivize the buyer to put in an offer. I just don't see a big change happening there. But those are my thoughts on it so far.
Awesome. Thank you, Zeno. Does anybody have any questions for Zeno? All right. Well, it is 11:05. I tried to keep this to an hour. Almost got there. If there are no questions, I'm going to let everybody go. I hope to see you guys on Friday. Please use Zeno as a resource. Please use Michelle as a resource. Use me. If you guys are in a situation and you're like, I don't know how to handle this, am I handling it the right way? Or you just want to brainstorm how to handle it, call me, text me, because we're not, when people say we as realtors need to be all in this together and support each other, that doesn't mean we all come together and put our foot down and say, I'm charging this. No, what that means is that things I know how to do well, you may not know how to do well, and vice versa. Let's support each other in that way. Support each other in education, positivity, and really just knock this out the park. Let's be the professionals here, and let's be that cream that rises to the top. All these agents that have been in the business 30 years talking down to all of us, because they're including me in that, let's show them what it feels like to be scared for their business, because we're just that damn professional that we're going to take all their clients. And if you're an agent on here that's been in the business for 30 years, we're coming for you, or you can be with us to support us and help us. So guys, make it a great day. Most of you guys are North Carolina family. We're in this together, and let's go out there and knock this out the park. As things change, we'll do more of these trainings. Just keep watching on my social media, YouTube. If you want to share this out with anybody that you think would find it valuable, this will be on my YouTube channel, so you can share the link. And I know we're going to be okay. And that's easier to say that than to feel it.